our greatest weapon of all.
First step in solving any problem is recognizing there is one.
It's time we started talking. Pain isn't something we talk.
All we can ever do for our heroes is remember them, and they gave up two lives, the one they were living and the one they would have lived. They gave up everything for our country, for us. They prayed for freedom and justice.
Some veterans not getting the timely care that they need. Less than 1% of Americans serving in uniform. Good news is that in recent years we've made historic investments to boost the VA budget.
What is it? Why should we care?
We should care about press freedom
because we were informed.
In democratic societies, free, diverse, and pluralist media enable public debates and are essential checks
You don't
on
look
power.
satisfied. Let's discuss.
What up, guys?
How you guys doing?
New episode, episode 18, VA service-connected disabilities, and this time we're gonna touch on hearing loss and tinnitus. So first time we go into depths, into details, and actual service-connected disabilities.
Yeah.
So just to give you a hint, so what are the most common VA service-connected disabilities?
Yeah, the most common, no matter what you did in service or what your job was, ringing in the ears, hearing loss, PTSD is certainly getting up there now, your lower back or your upper back, scars, your knees, diabetes, definitely for Vietnam vets, paralysis of the sciatic nerve, which falls in line with your lower back, and potentially diabetes with neuropathy, your ankles, and of course degenerative arthritis of the spine. And so those are probably the top common ones. No matter what you did, most vets will probably fall under one or two of those things for sure.
Yeah, so we're gonna just pick up one or two for our next episodes and talk in depth about them.
Yeah.
So without further ado, let's go into those details. And to give you a reminder, service connection may be established for a disability resulting from the injury suffered or disease contracted in the line of duty, or for aggravation of pre-existing injury suffered or disease contracted in the line of duty. So when you've been in the service, something happened to you, you're suffering, here is the result.
Yeah.
Service connection may be granted for any disease diagnosed after discharge when all the evidence, including that pertinent to service, establishes that the disease was incurred in service. So, basic info about what is service connection. And let's go into tinnitus. What is that?
Yeah. Tinnitus, or ringing in the ears, is not a disease, but a symptom which can result from a wide range of underlying causes, including prolonged exposure to abnormally loud sounds in the ear canal, ear infections, foreign objects in the ear, nasal allergies, which prevent or induce fluid drain or wax buildup. Tinnitus could also be noticed as part of a natural aging process as a side effect of some medications or of genetic hearing loss. However, the most common cause is noise-induced hearing loss.
So what are the common types of hearing loss?
Although there are many types of hearing loss, the most common type is sensorial loss, and the second most common type of loss is conductive loss. There are 3 types of hearing loss we encounter most frequently.
So the first one?
The first one also is known as nerve deafness. It is caused by damage to the hair cells in the inner ear. The inner ear is unable to transfer the sound vibrations to the brain, and it usually occurs in both ears. It's the most common type of loss, and it can result from aging, noise exposure, disease, birth defects, and nerve damage. This type of loss is usually treated with amplification or hearing devices. Some of the symptoms of a sensorial loss, I might be saying that wrong, difficulty understanding speech and background noises, say like sporting events. Speech and other sounds seem unclear, so sometimes that sound might cancel each other out. Trouble hearing high-pitched sounds, so a lot of veterans might not be able to hear what their wives are saying sometimes.
Of course.
And that's a medical issue. Persistent or episodic ringing or buzzing sound in the ears.
So the next type is conductive loss.
Yeah.
What is that?
Conductive loss is caused by damage to the outer or middle ear. Sound waves are blocked as they move through the outer or middle ear. Since the sound cannot travel effectively, the sound energy reaching the inner ear is weakened or muffled. Conductive loss may result from an infection, wax buildup, fluid in the ear, damage to the middle ear bones, a perforation of the eardrum, or obstruction in the ear canal. This type of loss is usually treated with earwax removal, medication, surgery, or a hearing device. And some of these symptoms of conductive loss are perceived speech and other sounds as stifled or distant, ear discomfort or discharge from the ear, swelling or redness of the outer ear, or pressure for fullness in the ear.
Yeah, those are two main ones of the three that exist.
Definitely.
So tinnitus is one of those things that can be tested for in some circumstances, since it can be caused by certain damage to the ear and its associated parts. However, self-reported tinnitus, like I have hearing, like let's say I have hearing in my ears, and without any physical damage to associated parts, doesn't happen a lot to people who are exposed to loud noises often. It is impossible to disprove since it's a subjective report, even though you can get 0% denied for that. You can still push it forward because it's subjective and you still have it.
Yeah.
So hearing loss and tinnitus can be related, but one is not required for the other. So let's say you have a diagram from a doctor from VA medical facility that shows that you have hearing loss when they test you with the frequencies. But that actual audiogram doesn't entitle you 100% to disability based on what do you have, unfortunately. So as far as for civilian doctors, it's better if you would have evidence from them as well. How does it affect your life? How actually much you use your ears on a daily basis, even though it's pretty much obvious that you need to hear what's going on, or how that ringing affects you. Because what's going on lately, most likely, even though it's one of the biggest disabilities, you might get denied easily.
Yeah. So you don't want to leave it vague, like it could have been this or that. Talk about how you got it in service. So talk about those loud things, flight lines, artillery, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, having a combat action badge might help a lot as well.
Definitely.
There is a good article by Henry James, PhD, and his research team, which is the title for the article is Auditory Test Results, Characteristics of Subject with and Without Tinnitus. You can see the link on the screen. If you want to go in depth into scientific research, what is that and how actually it is tested, and it might help you with your VA claim.
Yeah.
So what does this article says about tinnitus? It is the perception of sound that does not have an acoustic source in the environment. So let's say you have ringing in your ear, but there is no source of it except your brain or something that's physiologically happening inside your head.
Yeah, so it's very similar to almost like wheat in a field. When those little hairs are picking up sound and that's where it turns into electrical impulses for your brain to figure out. What happens, especially when you're in a loud noise environment, is sometimes those hairs get damaged, and now they're misfiring or touching each other. And that's why you're hearing this ringing in your ears when nobody else hears it. It's because it's your brain picking up electrical signals that aren't necessarily there. So imagine if like that wheatgrass in the field kind of fell over and it's firing off almost like a short.
Yeah, you can also refer besides that article to duty MOS hearing loss. Probability charge is via fast letter 10-35, and this letter actually introduces the duty MOS noise exposure listing, so you can find your MOS, and that letter will tell you if you are more likely than not to be exposed to loud noises, if you don't have any other evidence.
Yeah, at least try to use this.
Mm-hmm. So each branch of the armed service has reviewed and endorsed lists of military occupational specialties, or MOSs, and the corresponding probability of hazardous noise exposure related to your MOS or your specialty.
Yeah.
So that letter, if you don't have any other evidence, can help you. There is a huge list of MOSs, and there are three columns: high probable, moderate, and low probability that you've been exposed during your job to those loud noises. So also tinnitus comes in two forms. It's subjective and objective. In subjective tinnitus, only the person who suffers will hear the ringing in their own ears. And in objective tinnitus, the sound can be heard by a doctor who is examining the ear canals. Objective tinnitus is extremely rare, while subjective tinnitus is by far the most common form of the disorder. Of course, the sound of tinnitus may vary with the person experiencing it. Some will hear ringing, while others will hear buzzing sound. And at the times, people may hear a crippling or whistling sound. These sounds may be constant or intermittent, short ones. They may also vary in volume and are generally more obstructive than you would normally experience in a quiet environment. So it depends on the environment as well. Sometimes you would hear it just when you lay down in bed, when you calm down.
Yeah, and when all the like normal noises of the world kind of mellow out a little bit, you can kind of hear the tinnitus a little bit stronger.
Since we touch a lot of medical terms and the way it's examined, we give you reference to different articles. And another good one is Diagnostic Approach to Tinnitus by Richard W. Kramer, MD, and Ginva Hassan, MD, from University of New York. There is a web link on the screen that you can check. So that's how tinnitus is checked. And we'll give you a couple causes of tinnitus from this article.
Yeah.
So subjective tinnitus.
Autologic hearing loss, Meniere's disease or acoustic neuroma, ototoxic medications or substances, neurologic, multiple sclerosis or head injury, metabolic, thyroid disorder, hyperlipidemia, vitamin B12 deficiency, or psychogenetic depression, anxiety, fibromyalgia. And there's also objective tinnitus, which is a vascular or arterial bruit, venous, I don't know that word, or vascular tumors, I could say that. Mm-hmm. Neurologic, idiopathic muscle spasms, or the eustachian tube having a whole perforated eardrum.
Yeah, so those are two big ones.
Yeah.
How all this information would help you? I would say as long as you know what kind of tinnitus you have and how VA actually supposed to look at your disorder, you might know actually what kind of tests they might conduct on you, or what kind of tests from a private doctor you might have to do in order to prove that you have it.
Yeah.
And my question would be, Joe, like right now, what do you see as the claims? Do you get most of the times, do you see most of the times those claims to be approved or denied?
Yeah, for the most part, if you're a younger veteran, a lot of the times you'll see the hearing loss get denied because even though you might have a hearing loss, it may not be significant to your life yet, at least not to the VA's beliefs. So you might get denied just because you caught all the words right with the speech discrimination. Tinnitus, you have a good shot depending on what your MOS is, how long you're in the service, and what you did. So most of the time, tinnitus is one of the easier things to claim because no matter who you are in the military, you're playing with something loud, you're around something loud, or you're doing wild things. So there's a good chance that the majority of us will run into tinnitus no matter what you do in service. But the likelihood of hearing loss gets better as you get older because you know you're naturally it's going to get worse as you get older. But most of the time for these modern veterans like Iraq, Afghan vets, unless you have a severe hearing loss, most of the time you're going to see a denial or low percentages. But for my older guys, like say like World War II, Korean, Vietnam, there's a good chance you could hit a 50% or higher with hearing loss alone, just because of your job and how severe it is now at your age.
Yeah, so most likely, even though it's one of the most popular disability claims, you'll get denied.
Yeah.
Disabilities.
Yeah, if you're younger and you're catching all the words, there's a good shot you're going to get denied.
But the other part for that, if you appeal, most likely you'll get it.
Yeah.
But only through appeal.
Yeah, and you'll probably get a 0, maybe a 10% if you're lucky with the hearing loss itself. But yeah.
But if you get a 0, that's that's already a good shot because later it can be 50%.
Definitely. Zeros are always a good thing, so don't look at those as negative at all.
But if you get denied right now, most likely it's going to be much more difficult to get anything from that later.
Yeah, you'd have to prove some kind of issue.
Yeah.
Like during the process.
Since it's much more easier to prove that you have tinnitus through appeal, I have a question. Has anybody had any luck with reopening a previously denied claim for hearing loss and tinnitus due to acoustic trauma?
Yeah, definitely. Just because you get denied doesn't prevent you from filing in the future and doesn't kill that claim off for the rest of your life. In order to successfully reopen a previously and finally disallowed claim, the law requires the presentation of evidence that is both new and material. So in addition to the above directives, if a claim requires new and material evidence, VA must notify a claimant of the evidence and its information that is necessary to reopen the claim, and the VA must notify the claimant of the evidence and information that is necessary to establish his entitlement to the underlying claim for the benefits sought by the claimant. In essence, the VA's obligation to provide a claimant with the notice of what constitutes new and material evidence to reopen service connection claim includes the type of evidence that describes the basis for the denial and the prior decision, and describes what evidence would be necessary to substantiate that element or elements required to establish service connection that were found insufficient in the previous denial. Therefore, the question of what constitutes material evidence to reopen a claim for service connection depends on the basis on which the prior claim was denied.
Most likely you'll get denied because, as Joe said, you'll get all the words right, or you pass that audio like frequency exam. But let's say it happened maybe 2-3 years ago, and now you have all the evidence that actually it affects you in life, all the lay evidence. And that alone constitutes a good shot for that claim to be approved.
Yeah.
A really good one.
Yeah.
So pretty much, if you don't let it go and build up your claim, you'll have a good opportunity to appeal your initial assessment.
Yeah.
So
And always look at why they deny you. I know a lot of vets get mad when you see the denial, but read the reasons to why. And then you'll have a better idea of where you're at.
Yeah. But most likely it's going to be just based on a doctor's exam at VA.
Yeah.
Because there's pretty much every second veteran claims that he has some kind of hearing loss or audio trauma.
Yeah.
So VA is pretty good at testing for that disorder. So new evidence that you find, your lay evidence or whatever evidence you have from private doctor or something else, means that evidence that was not previously submitted to agency. So anything new that you have, you don't have to explain why you didn't submit it. You might have to explain it to the judge, but VA most likely they won't ask you. At least that's what I understand.
No, yeah, no, I agree.
So, so new and material evidence can be neither cumulative nor redundant of the evidence of record. So if you have a body letter already on the record, and you get another body letter from the friend that's been with you during that time that says exactly the same, it's redundant. So service connection. So let's say the veteran seeks service connection for tinnitus. He asserts that in service he has an acoustic trauma, and which actually continued to the present, and which means that he still suffers. The veteran maintains that he first noticed tinnitus in service and that the ringing in the ears has continued since that time. That would be our background story for the appeal. So service connection may be established for a disability resulting from injury suffered or disease contracted in the line of duty. That means that this situation falls under VA rule. Service connection may be granted for any disease diagnosed after discharge. That also falls under this rule. Where there is a chronic disease shown in such a in service or within the presumptive period under VA regulation or so to permit a finding of service connection, subsequent manifestations of the same chronic disease at any later date, however remote and service connected, unless clearly attributed to intercurrent causes. That's kind of a difficult, sentence to grasp, which means that if there is a disease that you are still suffering, and the period in between which you actually can claim that disability didn't run out, you can still claim it.
Yeah.
So the credibility and weight of all the evidence, including the medical evidence, should be asserted to determine its probative value, and the evidence found to be persuasive or unpersuasive should be accounted for, and reasons should be provided for rejecting any evidence favorable to the claimant. So that goes to all the lay evidence that you're going to be presenting to the judge or to Board of Appeals. Equal weight is not accorded to each piece of evidence contained in the record. Every item of evidence does not have the same probative value. So that means if you have 5 documents, 5 different lay evidence for to support your claim that you are appealing, it doesn't mean that each of those papers would have 15 or 20% out of 100. Some of them are more important, some of them less important. It's on judge to decide. The only evidence weighing against the claims is the VA examiner's opinion, which is based at least in part on 2 factors. That's a situation, it's not and rule. So that most likely what's judge gonna have on file. So one of those factors would be that there is no definitive data to show tinnitus at the time of the veteran's discharge from service. But it's because probably the radar overlooked that information, but most likely he didn't give all necessary documents and information for them to consider. And the second factor would be that the veteran had post-service occupational and recreational noise exposure in addition to his in-service noise exposure. Because you're a hunter and you hunt. And that's what happened. That's what was happening after you've been discharged, and that's why that activity actually affected your normal hearing. And there might be plenty others, so that like you've been doing like recreational kind of activities, maybe paintball, or I don't know, anything that would
Working on cars,
and you wasn't wearing hearing protection, and they can prove it. That might be a reason for denial. But most likely, we would have only self-reported evidence and first assessment from VA doctor on your hearing. Maybe that frequency audio lab analysis or words. What is called words? When you have to repeat words.
Oh, the speech discrimination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah. It's usually about 20 words you got to repeat.
If you can remember.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So, do you have anything to add for tinnitus?
Main thing, talk about the noise exposure you're into. Talk about a specific moment if you can. You know, when a grenade went off or you were on flight lines, or especially with the older vets, you guys didn't have any hearing protection at all. So that's one hell of a good excuse. But talk about your service and talk about how it's affecting you. Don't talk about it might be this, it might be that, or every once in a while it comes and goes. Talk about how it's affecting you. And so don't be shy. But let the VA examiner know what's going on, because just because you get all the words right on a hearing test doesn't necessarily mean you don't have tinnitus.
Mm-hmm. That's true. But keep in mind, for younger vets, you got much better shot if you appeal.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you get denied, don't get discouraged.
Mm-hmm. So also understand what tinnitus is, what hearing loss is. Educate yourself and back up your claim with lay evidence that you can find.
Yeah.
And as always, do you have any suggestions for book, great movie, stuff to do?
One good book is that It's Great to Be King, about Mel Brooks's life. And so if you're into comedy movies, you read that. He's a pretty funny guy.
This quote of words of wisdom of the day.
The only thing to do with good advice is pass it on. It is never any use to oneself.
Right, guys.
Thank you.
Oscar Wilde. That's it, folks. Thank you for listening. Until next time, over and out.